needs. But that promise comes with the responsibility for us as Christians to make sure that we are doing His will. So for the first 50 years here of this divided kingdom, okay, these two countries that had this one kingdom that had divided off into two. For the first 50 years, there was a lot of sporadic scuffles and wars that kind of took place between the north and the south kingdoms. Okay, because they were always vying for control. And the 18th year of Jeroboam, who was the first king of Israel, Abijam, there's a bunch of different ways to say it. We're going to call him Abijam because that's what kind of the easiest way for me to say it. Abijam succeeded Rehoboam. Okay, so Jeroboam's in Israel. Abijam, who was the one after Rehoboam, was there for 3 years as the king in Judah. Okay, now he is noted and known for, as we'll see if you go to 2 Chronicles chapter 13 and look at verse 4, he's noted for his rebuking of Jeroboam. This is what we looked at a couple of weeks ago. Ought ye not to know that the Lord God of Israel gave the kingdom of Israel to David forever, even to him and his sons, by a covenant of salt? Yet Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, the servant of Solomon, the son of David, is risen up and hath rebelled against his Lord. And there are gathered unto him the vain men, the children of Belial, and have strengthened themselves against Rehoboam, nations of the others of other lands, so that whatsoever cometh to consecrate himself with a young bullock and 7 rams, the same may be of priest of them that are no gods. But as for us, the Lord is our God, and we have not forsaken him. The priests which minister unto the Lord are the sons of Aaron, and Levites wait upon their business, and they burn unto the Lord every morning and every evening burnt sacrifices and sweet incense. The showbread also they set in order upon the pure table, and the candlesticks of gold with lamps thereof to burn every evening. For we keep the charge of the Lord our God, but ye have forsaken him. And behold, God himself is with us for our captain, and his priests with surrounding trumpets, to cry alarm against you, O children of Israel. Fight ye not against the Lord God of your fathers, for ye shall not prosper. Okay, so Abijah was noted for rebuking Jeroboam, and again, this is what we finished up with a couple of weeks ago. But over in 1 Kings, don't flip over there. We'll do that later. But his reign, Abijah's reign, eventually was characterized in 1 Kings 15 specifically says that he walked in all of the sins of his father. Okay, that brings us to our lesson today, and that's where we start at in chapter 14, and that is looking at Asa. All right, and Asa had. First of all, we see Asa's change of heart here, and we see Asa's loyalty to God first. With the first 12 verses here, we see how he turned to God and how he had rest in God. So Asa was raised by the guy that we just got done speaking of, Abijah. Okay, if you look at verse 1 here of chapter 14, we see that Abijah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the city of David, and Asa, his son, reigned in his stead. And his days, the land was quiet for 10 years. So Asa was raised up in this corrupt household. But even with him being raised in this corrupt household, we see in verse 2 a characteristic of Asa. And it says this, and Asa did what? What did it say about Asa? Verse 2. He did that which was what? Right. Right. So Asa here did that which was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. And because Asa following God and doing right before God, it brings in his nation this great spiritual revival all throughout Judah and even parts of Israel. It even leaks over into parts of Israel. Look at verse 3. For he took away all the altars of strange gods and the high places, and break down the images and cut down the groves. Verse 4 as well. And he commanded Judah to do what? What was his command? Our first talking of Asa here. Right? We see the very first impression of Asa is that he's doing right in the eyes of the Lord. In verse 4, what's his very first commandment we see him given? Seek God. Right? He's telling the nation to seek God. All right. So our first impression of Asa is this guy's got it figured out. Right? He's seen the error of the ways of his father. He's seen the other kings and kind of how they've not really necessarily done what they need to be doing. So we see Asa here commanding the people to seek after the Lord their God. Okay, and we go on down to verse 5, and we see more that he's done here. He take away out of all of the cities of Judah and the high places and the images, and the kingdom was quiet before him. So he goes in, he commands the people to seek after God. He removes all of the pagan altars, all of the high places, the incense altars, the sacred pillars, all the stuff that was in place. He got rid of all of it. Because all of those things were symbols of Judah's disloyalty to God. We got pagan images there. We have things set up where the priests are supposed to be. These sacred pillars that they're worshiping at. All of that Asa gets rid of because it's showing disloyalty to God. So he's turning Judah back to God. That's what he's doing. He's in the process of turning Judah back to God. And he's attempting to do that. So he then commands them as well to seek God and to observe his commandments. And because of that, right? Because of Asa's loyalty to God, the end of verse 5 tells us what about his kingdom? It was quiet, right? It was restful. It was quiet. There was no turmoil going on. Now, because of the ever-present chance of war with Israel, Asa took some steps starting in verse 6 here, to build these very high, very immensely fortified cities all throughout the nation of Judah. Okay, and these were actually the very same cities that Rehoboam, if you remember when we first started this, Rehoboam fortified these cities, and Shishak had come in and conquered them. So Asa kind of reinforces and refortifies these cities. Look at verse 6. And he built fenced cities in Judah, for the land had rest. And there was no war in those years, because the Lord had given him rest. Therefore he said unto Judah, let us build these cities, and make them walls and towers, gates and bars, while the land is yet before us. Because we have sought the Lord our God, we have sought him, and he hath given us rest on every side. So they built, and they prospered. And Asa had an army of men that bare targets and spears, out of Judah 300,000, and out of Benjamin that bare shields and drew bows 280,000. All of these were mighty men of valor. All right, so in the midst of this peacefulness and this prosperity that God was blessing him with, because they had turned to the Lord, he then reinforced these cities, and then equipped them with 500,000 men. Okay, so we look at verse 7 here of chapter 14. What cause and effect does Asa make clear to the people in Judah? Verse 7. What's the cause and effect here that Asa makes clear? That what caused them what? What was the cause and effect? Verse 7.
Worship God so they have peace.
Exactly, right? The cause and effect is worship God, follow God, seek after God. The result of that is a rest from their enemies and a rest from the stuff that's going on, that had been going on for quite some time. Len, hit that for me, will you please? Okay. See if we can get to the next slide. For some reason this isn't going. Is it stuck? Yeah. Is it? Okay, maybe it'll pop in a second. Just keep punching it back here and close it out if you have to and open it back up. Because what we have, the next slide I have for you is the map of the nation here. Because of the rest here that Judah is enjoying. The kind of settled them, and there was peace that was going on. And while Judah was enjoying the peace, the king of Ethiopia was actually in the process of building his army. Okay, so while the peace was going on, the king of Ethiopia was busy building an army, and he comes against Asa here with 300 chariots and an army of 1,000,000 men, and he shows up at Marsheth, and he sets up camp there to show this threat to Judah. Look at verse 9. And there came out against them Zerah, the Ethiopians, this is the king, with a host of 1,300 chariots, and came to Marshah. All right. And they set the battle in array in the valley of Zephthah, okay, at Marshah. So this is the area. There's a valley. It's actually had a little more detailed map. It's just a little bit north of Marshah, but that Marshah is kind of the main city that's there. There's a battle. He marches out to meet. Sensing that he has 500,000 men, the king of Ethiopia has double what he has. As Asa looks out, or any probably. We're probably not going to win this fight. They have 500,000 more men than we do. We're probably not going to win this fight. So what he does is in verse 11. So he meets them there at Zephthah, and in verse 11 he says he does this. Cried unto the Lord his God and said, Lord, it is nothing with thee to help, whether with me or with them that have Gerar, which you can see here. The Lord can peace and quiet in the land, rest on God. God struck the Ethiopian army so heavily, broken down entirely and completely unable to recover. Okay. They then ran back to Gerar, which is 25 miles through, and there was a trail all the way to Gerar as they fled. After they battled, and then they headed back as Asa pushes the Ethiopians back to the city of Gerar, and there's a trail of destruction kind of the whole way back. So we see Asa's rest on God, and because of that, we see his reward, as we saw when Asa's army didn't just deplete the Ethiopians, didn't just destroy them. They went on farther and did what? They plundered them and took the goods that they had left over. All of the cities in the area, they plundered all of the cities in the area all the way back, as we saw on the map there, and then returned back to Jerusalem with a vast reward and a vast collection of things that they had taken. In addition to that, Asa had attacked the Bedouins in the area. We see there in verse 14. And because of that, took a huge drove of livestock from them. So they plundered the Ethiopian army, they plundered another city and got a vast amount of livestock. I think it said cattle and sheep and camels, and took all of that back with them. The difference here it makes for Israel when they left it up to God, or when they were loyal to God. And because of the rest that God gave them because of their loyalty, Asa's commanded to know God and was commanded to do his will. And because of that, they met this huge army with confidence, and the Lord allowed them the battle and the blessings from winning the battle as well. So we get to verse 15, because of the success. And all of you, all ye be with him, and if ye seek him, he will be found of you. But if ye forsake him, he will forsake you. What is Azariah, give me a breakdown there or a summary of what Azariah just told Asa. You're going to rewrite that in your own words. What would you say? Be faithful, and God. The reason you got the blessings of the winning of the war is because you were being faithful to God. The moment that you quit being faithful to God, God's going to. That is with Him so that He can work through us to accomplish our life. So we have here the heart question. So when we're with you, God, and we're ready to do your will, that's being loyal to God, seeking God. You can see kind of the flow chart of how that happens. When we're with God to do God's will, expecting God to direct in our lives. You guys are all old head Christians and have been through this a lot, but lead us sometimes. Okay, but obeying God is not a guarantee of financial prosperity. Obeying God is not a guarantee of perfect health. Obeying God is not a guarantee that everything's going to be all right all the time. It's not. Okay, but those who stand with God, even in the midst of those difficult times, and those who do His will find joy and will find peace in this life and have the incorruptible rewards in eternity. Things are going to stink, but and roses here, eternal reward that will make this thing all worth it. Right? We know the hymn very well. The hope that we should have and the hope that we should take as Christians to continue to maintain the course, right? Continue to seek after His will. Azariah goes on to remind Asa here about some of the stuff that happened during the past. All right, let's look at verse 3 of chapter 15, 2 Chronicles. Now, for a long season, this is still Azariah talking, Israel hath been without the true God, and without a teaching priest, and without the law. But when they are in their trouble, did turn unto the Lord God of Israel, and sought Him, and He was found unto them. And in those times there was no peace to him that went out, nor to him that came in, but great vexations were upon all the inhabitants of the countries. And the nation was destroyed of nations, and city of city, and for God did vex them with all. They were disloyal. Israel could not even travel from city to city without expecting some type of turmoil. God sent them adversaries over and over and over again to cause them trouble because they were being disloyal to God. We as Christians cannot expect God to not cause us problems when we are being disloyal to Him. God is a God of love. God is a God of compassion. God is a God of truth, and He wants us to do all the right things. God is also, as the Old Testament teaches us over and over again, God is also a God of judgment of sin. And if we expect to be disloyal in our faithfulness to God, we can expect Him to allow adversities and troubles to come in our way as a way of chastisement for doing wrong things, first of all, and that correction leads to us turning back to God. That's why He does it, right? That's the old saying is, son, this hurts me worse than it hurts you when I get to whipping. All right, I haven't experienced that yet with Pippa. I'm sure that I will. All right, I'm sure that she's just going to be an angel, right, and never make any mistakes. No, I'm sure I'm going to get to that point where we're going to have that conversation, and as much as I can, it's going to be a whole new world. Back to the right ways. And that's the lesson that he's trying to reinforce here with Asa and using Azariah. Azariah, the son of Oded, here in verse 7, challenges Asa to be different by being strong and not letting his hands grow weak. Verse 7. And let not your hands be weak, for your work shall be rewarded. God is going to reward us if you persevere with being loyal to God. God promised Asa that. That's the same promise that we have as Christians. He will be loyal to us. He will reward us if we are strong in our faithfulness to Him. Let's go to verse 8. Let's finish this up. So we see God's request, and then we have Asa's response in verses 8 through 19. This is where we'll finish up with. Asa responds here to Azariah's challenge by intensifying the destruction of these pagan idols. Verse 8. And when Asa had heard these words and the prophecies of Oded the prophet, he took courage in Benjamin and out of the cities which had taken from Mount Ephraim, and renewed the altar of the Lord, and there was before the poor the Lord, and he gathered all of Judah and Benjamin and the strangers them and the stranger and out of Simeon, for they fell to him out of Israel in abundance, when they saw that the Lord his God was with him. So they gathered themselves together at Jerusalem in the 3rd month of the 15th year reign of Asa, and they offered unto the Lord the same time of the spoil which they had brought, 700 oxen and 7,000 sheep. And they entered into a covenant to seek the Lord God of their fathers with all of their heart and with all of their soul, that whosoever would not seek the Lord God of Israel should be put to death. Okay, whether small or great, whether man or woman. And they swear unto the Lord with a loud voice, and with shouting, with trumpets, and with cornets. And all of Judah rejoiced at the oath, for they had sworn with all of their heart, and sought him with all their whole desire, and he was found of them, and the Lord gave them rest round about. And also concerning Maacah, the mother of Asa the king, he removed her from being queen, because she has made an idol in Grove. And Asa cut down her idol, and stamped it, and burnt it at the brook of Kidron. But the high places were not taken away out of Israel. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was perfect all of his days. And he brought into the house of God the thing that his father had dedicated, and that himself had dedicated, silvers and golden vessels. And there was no more war unto the 5th and 30th year of the reign of Asa. So we see the response. As God used Asa to stay loyal, to stay faithful, we see the response. And as he responded, he intensified the destruction of everything that was ungodly in the nation. Okay, got rid of more of the idols, got rid of more of the stuff that was in the high places, and he had a strong, and because of that, there was this revival, this strong reform within the nation of Judah. Multitudes of spiritually minded people with God. The people joined together in Jerusalem. They renewed their covenant with God. They sacrificed a tremendous number of animals to God, and continued to refuse to. Those who refused to seek the Lord were killed. Asa even went as far as to remove his grandmother. Okay, Rehoboam's second wife, that would have been his grandmother, from being the queen mother. Okay, got rid of her because of her false god practices. This sweeping revival, okay, because of one man's decision to follow God. Now, Asa had some power. Yes, he did. But because of one man's decision to follow God, an entire nation was changed. And there was a revival because of that. And there was a resurgence of people following God, and that lasted until the 35th reign of Asa. And if you look at me one more time at verse 17 of chapter 15, but the high places were not taken away out of Israel. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was perfect all of his days. What helped Asa remain loyal to God throughout much of his reign? The high places were. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was perfect all of the days. Asa continued to do what? Seek so that God would be with him. So we see the abundance, the great things that are happening in the nation of Judah because of Asa's responding to the challenge in his heart of God. Now that's just half the story. We get to chapter 16 next week, and we see Asa's loyalty to himself and the fall that happens because of it. So it's a reminder of us. We're going to see this again next week. It's kind of that we see the pattern here, right? A reminder again of us. Loyalty to self will lead to destruction. Loyalty to God will not. Okay? Loyalty to God will not. Let's pray.